investigating the intersection between AI and economic policy making. So when was the last time all of you opened up a major news publication? Was it the New York Times, The Economist, BBC, or CNN? And what was the headline? Was it talking about sky-high inflation or rising unemployment? Was it overpopulation or the latest updates on a trade war? In any case, we're living in a world of increasing economic problems. And if it's stressful for us, imagine how it must feel for the people who actually have to solve these issues, the policymakers. See, the thing is, in reality, policymakers simply just can't keep up with the amount of economic problems that we have. It's not a matter of fact of whether or not they can actually achieve creating the economic policies, but it's rather a matter of whether or not they can solve it in time before the economic policies leave lasting effects on society. As a result, this poses a major issue in solving economic problems that we have today. At the same time, though, artificial intelligence, or AI, is on the rise. This is especially true for large language models, or LLMs, which provide fast, generated thought response towards any prompt that you give it. So seeing the rise of AI and yet the increasing economic problems, one has to ask the question, what if AI could ease the policy creation process? Now there's a clear distinction that I want to make here, and it's the difference of using ease versus replace. I'm not trying to investigate here whether AI can completely replace policymakers, but rather whether AI can provide a general solution framework listing all the potential solutions to the context or problem that it's given, so that all policymakers need to do are eliminate the irrelevant or illogical economic problems and determine the specific increments, like an increase of the interest rate by a certain amount of percentage, etc. So I'm going to be investigating this through providing the AI with a complex economic problem that historically already has a very effective economic policy implemented, and then testing whether or not the AI's response to the economic problem is accurate or matches or is in line with economic theory with the actual effective economic policy. So the complex economic problem that I chose for this investigation was the Great Depression. I chose this project because it wasn't just attributed to a single issue, but it was attributed to multiple different factors, such as the 1929 stock market crash or tariffs and things like that. I also chose the Great Depression because it didn't just affect a singular industry or market, but it affected agricultural workers, it affected industrial workers, and it also affected the economies of many other international nations. So I also chose the Great Depression one more time because it has already a largely effective economic policy implemented, that being the New Deal policy. It was a multi-phase solution that included solutions for relief, immediate relief, medium-term recovery, and then long-term reform. So once again, I would basically just feed the AI context of the Great Depression, ask it for it to come up with an economic policy, and then see and compare whether that policy that was created by the AI was in line or was accurate or was followed through by the New Deal policy itself. So before this investigation even started, I had to first choose the LLMs that I wanted to use for this method. And I chose ChatGPT and Gemini. These are the two most, I guess, well-known and renowned LLM systems. And realistically, these are the LLM systems that policymakers themselves would choose as well. For each of the LLMs, I chose the 4.0 model and the Pro model respectively, because I wanted to simulate how AI at its best potential, at its peak potential, whether it could be an effective policymaker or not. I didn't want to have a half-hearted response, right? And determine that to be my final conclusion and investigation. So, as we all know, LLMs take from thousands of databases, right? And as a result, they are trained to reason and model in a very general sense, but not necessarily a sense that fits into any specific role. However, researchers at Emmerich Institute showed that training AI with questions on hard spatial reasoning would actually improve the spatial reasoning capacity of the AI. So applying that same research, I tried to apply that through providing the AI with hard prompts about macroeconomics, and then trying to build up its economic knowledge so that it would become an effective policymaker. For example, one of the prompts that I posed was trying to name all the economic factors that could have led to an economic problem. And what I was trying to seek from this was trying to increase the AI's ability to reason through multiple perspectives and actually consider multiple factors and multiple stakeholders. After this, I would control the AI even further by introducing the role of the economist. This was to ensure that the AI wasn't pulling from any sources that had an inaccurate definition of what an economic policymaker should do. I also introduced the problem. I didn't just say, here's the Great Depression, find a solution for it. But I actually outlined all the different factors of the Great Depression, because it once again simulates what an actual policymaker would need to do for a new economic problem that the AI needs to solve. Finally, I would introduce the task and then ask the AI to limit its information to just before the New Deal policy was created. This is to ensure that this investigation could be used for actual real-life scenarios and prevented the possibility that the AI was simply just plagiarizing off of the New Deal policy and then just suggesting the New Deal policy again. Sorry, could you go back to the... Yeah, so with the prompts here, I also included a situational prompt. Now, research shows that if you place AI in high-stakes situations, it actually improves its critical thinking and comprehension. So within every trial, I would basically say like, here's an invasion or here's a war that's happening right now. And then because I increased like the stakes of what I was trying to say, which was trying to come up with an economic policy, it allowed the AI to become more comprehensive and then reach more, detailed and the most important answers as well. And I would record this over 3 trials through each LLM for a total of 6 trials, and then map it out on Google Sheets. So after I recorded all the responses for all 3 trials in both ChatGPT and Gemini, I would record on the Google Sheets, where I would split into 2 categories. One of them outlined all the key characteristics of the New Deal policy, and the other outlined other economic policies suggested. For each trial, for each policy that matched characteristic of the New Deal, I would place it in the first section, and then I would place all the other economic policies as suggested in the latter section. Then I would synthesize it, meaning across all 3 trials, for the responses or the policies it suggested for at least 2 or more of the trials, I would put it into the synthesized response section. And this wasn't just true for all the New Deal characteristics that it suggested, but also all the other economic policies that it also offered. I would finally evaluate the total synthesized policy, not just on the amount of characteristics and the amount of comparison to the New Deal, but also in the other economic policies, whether it was in line with the economic theory, whether it accurately and adequately addressed a factor, or whether or not it addressed a stakeholder. So based on the findings and based on the experiment, one important thing to note is that there weren't any red flag policies. These were policies that basically had irrelevant or incorrect economic logic used. And if these policies were found in the AI responses, the general effectiveness of AI as a policymaker as a whole would dramatically decrease, right? But thankfully, there weren't any red flag policies involved. Now, here's where there were a few stark contrasts between ChatGPT and Gemini. For one, ChatGPT solutions focus a lot more on immediate relief and long-term solutions. So things like providing public works infrastructure projects to directly and immediately employ millions, or increasing the solvency rate of the central bank to ensure less panic and less uncertainty, right? Whereas Gemini focused more on medium-term recovery solutions. There were differences as well in the replicability as well. ChatGPT's responses were more consistent across all 3 trials. So definitely, like, if there was one policy suggested in trial 1 of ChatGPT, it was much more likely to be found in trial 2 and trial 3 of ChatGPT than it was in Gemini. Finally, and this is something really interesting, that ChatGPT actually included solutions that involved multiple perspectives and actually included all the stakeholders. See, one of the key limitations of the New Deal policy was that it solely focused on the interests of the US and sort of ignored and pushed aside all the pleas of all these other international nations that were heavily reliant on US trade. So because of this, ChatGPT actually suggested solutions like eliminating trade barriers like tariffs, and it actually showed promise to even be better than the New Deal and actually consider more perspectives than the New Deal ever considered as well. So while the New Deal considered the agricultural and industrial workers, ChatGPT showed its ability to also consider international nations without compromising the interests of the US. So finally, the general evaluation of AI effectiveness. Across both LLMs, I would say there was a clear consideration of most of the stakeholders, as well as all the policies used, correct theory. They were all pretty practical. They all addressed a certain factor. In terms of the best LLM though, just because of its multi-perspective consideration, because the responses were more consistent, it reduces uncertainty for policymakers and even introduces policymakers to solutions they haven't considered before. I think ChatGPT edges out Gemini in that consideration. But in terms of the overall experimentation process, I have to admit, this is still done at a very introductory scale, right? It's a very small scale. You need to conduct over 10 trials of this across 5 to 6 LLMs. It's also unquantifiable. We can say, a certain policy suggested by ChatGPT is kind of accurate to what the New Deal policy suggests, but we can't put an actual percentage or number on that. So that has to be developed as well. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. My son, can I call my son? Okay. This is really good. This is like, it's like I'm seeing my undergraduate students doing their bachelor defense. So may I know why you choose this topic first?
Right. So, I like to read the news a lot. If it isn't me, it's usually my dad. And whenever I go in the news, I just see all these economic problems, right? And we hear so much talk about economic problems without a lot of focus on the solutions that are actually being used to prevent the problems, right? We don't have a lot of headlines talking about the new policies that are put in place to solve economic problems, right? So this sort of led to my curiosity of what are the policymakers actually doing, right? Are they ineffective? Are they incompetent? But I realized I don't think that's actually the case. It's just that it's not being addressed fast enough. And that's why I sort of spurred me to think, what if AI could be used to speed in the process as well?
I see. Okay. Yeah. So actually, for the real whether this is implementable or not, actually there will be a lot of issues must be addressed, right?
Yeah.
To share with you, I have ever researched about blockchain. If you ever heard about it, and we thought that by using blockchain, to implement it in the corporation, then it will prevent corruption, right? That kind of stuff. But you see, sometimes it's not about whether we can make the policy. It's more like, do we want to use the technology itself, right? Because a lot of people has their own necessity for themselves, right? So actually, for the practical, there is still, will AI really help in making the good economic policy? It's big questions still, for sure. But I really like that you really try to make this research. Is it really like research that you identify the problem, that there is economic problem, and then you think that the problem is using AI. The problem is that the slowness of the policy making. Though you should actually make some research first about that, right? To enhance your claim, right? This is all because I don't really remember whether do you show me kind of reference, right? Because in research, reference is important. If you, for example, put some references, say that, okay, this is the problem, that the speed to make the policy is the problem, not the one that will use the policy is the problem, then it will be much better actually. Are you writing paper for this?
Yeah, I actually submitted this research paper already to a competition for now. It hasn't been formalized yet, but I had to present this as well as an exhibition as well. So I had to already I came up with a research paper already. It's not fully finalized yet.
Okay. But you are writing this for paper, right? Yeah. So that is the first, right? As I said, you need to. You need to really make it I already really see that this is the real problem. I think that is the first that you could enhance. And then, there is really not much numerical numbers in your presentation, because because this is Indian, this is AI, right? You need to put some numbers. You should, because that numbers will show whether this is improvement or not, right? And then as you see, I think this is still pretty much rough research.
Yeah.
So actually, just using one Great Depression as the sample and then using Gemini and also the ChatGPT, I think you cannot really make a meaningful contribution or conclusion actually from that, right?
Right.
So I think you should make more examples, not only about that. And I think you address this first but could you please explain it to me again? Actually, it's sometimes questionable whether the AI actually give you new solution because they are smart, or they actually just, well, there is similar stuff like before and then they just retell again. I mean, they also have the data about Great Depression for sure, right? How you ensure about that?
So once again, this is a very like historical problem, right? And this was a very foundational issue. I just wanted to see, could it solve an economic problem as complex as the Great Depression, right? But definitely in the future, and it's something that I'm trying to investigate right now. What if I used a problem that was very modernized, so very recent, and very localized as well? So let's say, something that happened in like the north of Sumatra, right, or South Java, where there's not a lot of like information.
Probably the economic problem pasca pandemic of COVID, right?
Right. And so those economic problems, they don't have a lot of information about, the economic solutions, right? So that's something that I'm currently investigating right now, and whether if I give it a much more modern problem with a lot less of a solution involved, is it gonna still plagiarize and just give me something like, a New Deal policy or not?
I think just a few more. It's first, when you say about Gemini and GPT, it's better actually you emphasize to the model, the architecture of the AI model itself, not the platform that use the architecture, you see, because this ChatGPT can change the architecture, and then you will get different results. Gemini Google can change the architecture, and you will get different results. So you should emphasize in that. You should not use the platform. You should just say this model A, model B. I mean, you can check their website. I think they will share a bit about the model, right? I think that's basically you need to formulate it to, and of course the metric, whether no red flag and then this is better, it's still like subjective
it needs to be more quantifiable,
you should make it better. Probably you need to make focus group discussion or something. Okay, I think it's really nice. Thank you.
Thank you.